Ah, that's one. Definitely. Have you ever seen Die Hard? Beautiful film. In this video, I'm going to be talking about films I have rewatched a hell of a lot. I'm not going to remember every single one of these films because, let's be honest, I've watched a lot of films in my lifetime. It's only been 20 odd years, but you know. I guess I want to choose favorites, maybe? It's hard to say. Like, I didn't even look through the shelf. Look, there's a reason why you would rewatch a film. There's either the aspect of it's the only thing on TV, maybe it's traditional, you know, maybe for Christmas, instead of watching a Christmas story or a Christmas carol, you're like, fuck you guys, I'm watching Die Hard again. Maybe you grew up watching a lot of 80s films or a lot of genre-specific films or films of particular actors or directors, so you'll rewatch them for those particular aspects. For directors, for me, I would go with Edgar Wright. I've watched all of his films multiple times. So mostly, the most I would say would be Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim. They're also two of like my top 10 favorite films of all time, so you know that obviously helps. Then you probably go with David Lynch as well. Yeah, he's my favorite director. So of course that comes into play as to I've watched all of his films at least once, some multiple times, like Eraserhead or Jesus, I guess maybe just Eraserhead. I've watched a few times. Blue Velvet I've watched a few times. Fire Walk with Me, yeah. Mulholland Drive. But these films that, like, oh, I've rewatched these multiple times. Okay, but is there a reason? Now, for the obvious, the obvious previous two I've just mentioned, for David Lynch and Edgar Wright, they're because they're my favourite director. I like watching their works, and maybe these are the favourites of their works that I like to rewatch. And it makes me appreciate the other films, because then when I finally get around to watching the other films again, I'm like, damn, I forgot how great this film was, but of course I don't watch it as much. Like when you're watching the Cornetto trilogy, the Edgar Wright trilogy with Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, and The World's End, and you rewatch the frackin' doodles out of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and then when you finally get around to rewatching World's End again, you're like, wow, this film's brilliant. Why the hell do I not rewatch this as much as the other ones? It's because the other ones are more iconic for you. It's usually the case. Is the case with me. I love The World's End, but I prefer to watch the other two instead. Mostly Shaun of the Dead. I really just love it, okay? It means a lot to me because I have a history with the film. And talking about a history with the film, you've got particular films for me like Evil Dead 2 or Alien, especially Alien. Alien goes further back to my childhood. I've mentioned this a few times. Scarred me for life because I watched it as a child. Not a great idea, even if your dad says it's a great idea. That film scarred me for life. I still get nightmares from that film. And it took me until watching the second film. And again, this is the weird kind of thing of my childhood. We watched Alien, then we watched Aliens, then we watched Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection and Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which is easily the worst. Never gonna watch that film again. Once is enough. And it's just kind of interesting to like note that I watched all these films, and I was terrified of like Alien and the facehugger and all that deal. And then of course you get to Prometheus, and yet still I went to the cinemas to watch that as well as Covenant, and I was still shit scared while I was watching them. Anyway, but like that's the kind of thing. Like sometimes there are films that can just take your breath away in terms of the sheer horror or the sheer delight. Like Love Actually. Love Actually is a film I have watched plenty of times, not just because it's a Christmas film, but because it's like the best of all of those like ensemble pieces. And I don't know if we watched it on TV the first time or if we watched it on DVD the first time, but either way, we've never not watched it fully. Like, well, I mean, we've watched it. I know as a family we've watched it a lot. I know personally I've watched it a lot. And it was even on the other day, and it's fucking April, or at least it was. It's officially May now because it's past midnight. But like, it's April, and it's a Christmas movie is on TV. What is happening? But that's the thing. Like, just because it's set in Christmas doesn't mean you can't watch it whenever. Cough, cough, Die Hard. Die Hard again, another franchise I grew up with. And then you get to stuff like action. Like, you get to a genre that you really grew up with. For me, action and sci-fi. I wasn't big on horror as a kid. I watched a few, but I didn't like being scared. You know, I was a weak piece of crap. Didn't like being scared, but I liked action. And so, of course, then you've got the Terminator films. Those were big rewatchable films for me as a kid, specifically the first two. Oh my god, we watched them a lot. But then you got something more superhero-y, still action, but more kid-oriented. And you got something that's down on the DVD shelf, Sky High. Which is a film, Sky High, much like Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo 2, even Robots to some degree, you know, are films that I would rewatch a lot. But then, of course, you got the aspect of, oh, but that's because you're a kid. It's like, yeah, but I watched those, like last year. I mean, I watched the two Scooby-Doo films last year, and Robots last year. I'm pretty certain I did. I haven't watched Sky High for a few years now, but, I mean, I still remember it like the back of my hand. When did that get there? Anyway, I don't think there's anything like... I can't say that there isn't anything unique about rewatching films, because again, it could just be a comfort film. If I feel sad, I go to watch Love Actually. It makes me feel happy, unless you're depressed about a relationship. But then you're like, oh, everyone else can be happy, but instead of me, but I'm happy because they're happy. Maybe that's your alternative point of view. Maybe you want to get shit scared, so you're like, I'm going to watch Alien, or I'm going to watch the 1990 version of It, because that apparently still scares you, because you're scared of clowns, maybe? I don't know. I'm not. I never got scared of that. But anyway, I was a teenager by the time I started watching that. And then maybe you're a big, superhero fan. So you go to the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, or at least the first two films if you don't like the third one. And there's always something that's comforting. Maybe you want the action. Maybe you're a big comic book nerd or just a comic book reader. And you love, say, the Marvel films, and you especially love Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is probably the most... I've got a few comic book nerd fans, friends, and they are... Most of them all definitively say that Winter Soldier is the best of the Marvel films, at least the most comic accurate, or whatever their argument be, and so maybe they'll rewatch that a lot. I know one of my colleagues does a lot, and that's, again, your cup of tea. And I think that's kind of the joy of films, and exactly why I have them on Blu-ray. Something like this, come on, get out of your slot, you son of a bitch. Flying High, aka Airplane. This is a film I've watched since I was a kid. Of course, I didn't watch the Blu-ray. I got the Blu-ray a few years ago. I didn't even have the DVD. It was just on TV, because it's that freaking funny that we'd rewatch it. Maybe you'd have a night where a particular film was on TV, and you decide, I want to tape it, because maybe you've got a, DVR or whatever. We still have it in the corner over there, a VHS system, video home system. It's a VCR. And we would use the tapes, because we had a drawer full of tapes, whether they be tapes of TV shows or something like that, and stuff that we've recorded from the TV, and we'll just record, a film that's maybe on, and we watch that over and over and over. Maybe it's a TV show that you really like. I don't really know what the point of this video is. I was kind of wanting to make a list of films that I've rewatched a lot. What are the most rewatched films I've ever watched? But the thing is, I don't know. Outside of the obvious standouts being, again, Flying High or Alien, I don't really know what my most rewatched film is, because there are films that I've, even in the past 2 to 3 years, have watched multitudes of times, because they're just that good. I almost fell into my shelf. Because they're just that good, or you just love them that much, And I think that can kind of come from a certain respect. Maybe you love this film. Maybe, say, you really liked Parasite from 2019. Which, to be fair, most people did, and it is a tremendous film. And I myself have watched it 4 or 5 times now, in the span of a year. And I love rewatching it, because it's just so amazing to watch. And it's there could be a film like that you'd love to rewatch, but then there could be a film say Blade Runner. For me, my favorite film of all time, Blade Runner 2049. Came out in 2017, watched it twice in theaters, have watched it, I think, maybe 2 more times since then. I've definitely watched it at least once in the theater room, and definitely once out in the lounge room when we showed Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 to Mum. She likes Blade Runner 2049 more, which I'm really happy about. But at the same time, it's kind of more of a different... It's enough of a different film that maybe more conventional audiences could enjoy more. Either way. It's kind of like my favorite film. My mum likes it. Yeah. But that's a film I've watched maybe 4 times since it came out, 4 to 5 times, and that's over a span of a few years, rather than me in 1 year watching it over and over and over and over and over. But then there comes to the downside of rewatching films, and that would be something like, for me, unfortunately, Evil Dead 2. And to a degree, Alien. For Alien, the horror lessens and lessens for me, but at the same time, I haven't really been affected by the horror of that film since I was still scared of the Xenomorph. Which, to be fair, I am to some degree still, but like when I was like, didn't even want to mention it, didn't even want to see a picture of it. I remember seeing a magazine and flipping through it, had a picture of a Xenomorph, and I threw the magazine away. I'm like, nope, not having this. But then, the film still is such a meditative film. You go into it, got such a feel to it because it's got such a particular set of pacing and the music and the sound effects and everything intertwined so well that the horror is still there through the ambience, through the suspense, through the atmosphere. Love atmospheric films. And so there are certain parts where the Xenomorph is there, and I'm not exactly particularly scared. Especially when you get to watching aliens and suddenly you can just shoot them with a gun. It's just a thing. But of course, in the situation of the first film, you don't have that benefit. And then you get to, again, Evil Dead 2, which is a film I love. I do love it. But sometimes I'm rewatching it and maybe I can get bored during watching it because, there's a reason why I did a video last year of The Evil Dead versus Evil Dead 2, which is better. The idea wasn't to be like, I'm gonna be like a big fanboy and say Evil Dead 2 shits all over the Evil Dead or whatever. Instead, for me, it was a comparison of how the films work as films. For The Evil Dead, it's a straight-up horror film, and it's beautifully done in terms of atmosphere and environment and effects. It's a masterclass of horror filmmaking, and I adore it. It still is rather scary. I never really found it scary until the time I watched it last year, because the first time I watched it, I thought it was really cheesy, but then the time I watched it last year, which I think was maybe my second time actually watching it, because my second time actually watching it, I watched it with the DVD commentary, which was a great DVD commentary, but then the next time I watched it was last year, and I was watching it for the sake of, I just want to watch it and see which one I think is better, and it was just so immersive with its atmosphere and its horror. But then with Evil Dead 2, you just jump, because it's like, outside of the obvious copyright stuff, and then they had to redo the intro of the narrative and stuff. It's like, is it a sequel? Is it kind of a soft reboot? Does it really matter? You could technically, as Bruce Campbell says, if you just kind of cut out the whole girlfriend part of the start of the second film and just kind of glue the first one straight into it, then it pretty much combines pretty well. It doesn't really, but it kind of does, but it doesn't really. Outside of the continuity errors of like, it's been filmed a few years later, why do they look different, yada yada yada. And there's actually a lot that really kind of continuity stuff, but in terms of narrative, it does kind of continue, because you're now looking into Ash's psyche of like, well, we don't know why he's here again, but this is where his sister died. He had to chop up his friends. And now he's brought his girlfriend to this shack, and look, demons are back. Woohoo. And it's spooky. I don't think the horror is particularly amazing, but at the same time, as a comedic feat, the film works amazingly in terms of practical effects, in terms of filmmaking. It is a masterclass again. Bruce Campbell is excellent, and I love his scene where he's just laughing at everything, and everything is laughing back at him, and just the house is taking revenge on him with bloody black blood going everywhere. It's one of my favorite scenes in film. And I love rewatching it. But then, of course, you get to the ending of the film, and if this is after tonal and pacing issues, at least in my mind, because you have to jump back and forth between Ash and with the other people that we're going to introduce that are bait for later in the film, and the jumping between the action and the comedy and then the horror, sometimes for me it just doesn't blend well. And I even have a friend who doesn't like the second one because it's not a horror film. he doesn't classify it as a horror film. He's like, it's a comedy. It's like a satire of horror films, more or less, like a parody to some degree. Like there is obviously horror elements, but it's so much more of a comedy that the horror is very much outshined by its, you know, comedic effects and the comedic nature of pretty much the whole backbone of the film. Whether you classify the backbone being more of a horror or being more of a comedy. Maybe it's a backbone of horror because its predecessor was horror and the whole vein of this is horror, but then it's got all this, you know, meaty chunks of comedy put onto it. I don't know, I'm just kind of describing the human anatomy. That doesn't really matter. And I guess it depends on what you're kind of looking for, especially in that kind of rewatchable factor. Rewatching a film that has a particular horrifying mood can be a nuisance because you might get used to the horror and just might wear off on you, you know? Oh, that's when this jump scare is going to come in, or maybe you're just tired of the atmosphere because you've experienced it so often. And, of course, then you kind of get a bit of a drought when it comes to that. And I still love Evil Dead 2. I kind of dislike the fact that it goes right into the time travel element at the end, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, well, that happens. And then you get the next film, which is still, Army of Darkness is still pretty good. So I guess it's happy enough, except for the fact that, you know, they retcon the ending of the, you know, by the start of the next film by like saying, no, when he gets to the past, he gets locked up and they boo him and they, you know, he's not a hero. Even though it's meant to be the whole tragic thing of like, oh, he's doomed to relive this whole thing of deadites and demons and stuff, which is kind of meant to be an ironic thing in its own way. So it's comedic, still comedic, more of a horrifying. But then, lastly, there is obviously the film that you will rewatch consistently over and over and over and always love it. And that's what, for me at least, a film that isn't strictly one type of nature. This film isn't strictly horror or strictly comedy or strictly action. In fact, it's not even a horror film. But because it's not a horror film, maybe that's the benefit for it, because, of course, some horror films you can rewatch over and over and over, and it just gets kind of boring, maybe. Depends. Depends on how well crafted it is. You could be so immersed in it that it's just, oh, it's beautiful. But maybe you need time to, you know, give yourself a break, to maybe forget about elements of it, to kind of relive in the real world and then come back to it and be like, okay, now I want to hit this horror right in the head kind of deal. But then there's this film, for me, which is action, it's comedy, it's comic book-y, it's dramedy, it's not really dramedy, but it's got dramatic elements. It's got Pilgrim vs. the World, which is probably, for me, the film that I can rewatch endlessly, multiple times in a year, and will not grow tired of it. You know, whereas a film like Alien, I wouldn't say I'd grow tired of Alien, but like Evil Dead 2 I might grow tired of. Alien I could arguably grow tired of, if I watch it multiple times in a year, not over like a lifetime. Airplane, Flying High, you know, that film, I can get tired of the comedy of that, but sometimes you can just get to that airport scene where they were arguing over the speaker and you're just like, I love this movie. It's just, the guy goes and he starts beating everyone up. Oh, it's great. I love it. But like, sometimes you can get tired of the comedy. That's just straight comedy. But Scott Pilgrim, outside of its fast-paced nature and like so much other stuff to it, there are so many things that aren't repeated and they're so unique, and you've got all these great cutaways, so the film's always progressing. You're never really getting tired of what you've just seen, because either you're getting a kind of redone version of it to a different degree, that again furthers the plot or whatever, or ups the comedy, or ups the action. But like, it's never tiring, and at least for me, it's never tiring as a film. It's never annoying. It's never boring. It's not a film I could look at my phone during, because then I'd look up and be like, wait, what? Another X is dead, or something dramatic is really happening. You know, like something happens and it's great and I love it. And that's the joy of rewatching movies, because they're made to be rewatched. I mean, why the hell would you get, you know, films on Blu-ray and DVD and then 4K and then XK and then quadruple 3D and then, I don't know, IMAX in your own home, maybe? I don't know. But like, what else would the point be if you can't rewatch it? So go out there, rewatch your favourite films, you know? Who cares if it's a shitty film, or if globally it's considered a shitty film, enjoy it. It's fun, you know. Swiss Army Man, which is a film I've watched multiple times now and love, was like not liked very much upon its first viewing at one of the film festivals it was at. I think it was Sundance, maybe it was Cannes, I don't remember. I think it was even booed and people like left during it. But it has since like got this reputation of it's just fun and goofy and great. So just, you can also rewatch films to learn to appreciate them on different aspects. Either way, this has been 20 minutes. Yeah. Look, hey, if you have a film that you like to rewatch over and over and over again, maybe it's a guilty pleasure, maybe it's just a good film that makes you escape from the world that's currently killing everyone, whether literally or mentally or physically. Oh, bloody hell. If you have a film like that, then please feel free to track it down in the comments. I'd like to know what kind of film is your comfort film or your most rewatched film or the film that you, if anyone said you have one film to go on a desert island with, I don't even know. Mine would be Scott Pilgrim, probably Blade Runner 2049, and I think maybe even Alien. Yeah, because at least then I've got some action comedy with Scott Pilgrim. I've got Alien, which is just, and you got Blade Runner, which is just. There's my Free Desert Island films. That's the title of this film. What are my Free Desert Island films, and why are they? Because they're so rewatchable. I'm tired. All right, it's like 2 a.m. No, it's 1 a.m. That's how long I feel like I've been filming for. Either way, this is my last video for tonight, so I'm going to go to bed. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, feel free to share and subscribe. If you're not new, then if you're not new, then feel free to like. I don't know. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like. That's what I'm trying to go for. Wow. But yeah, no, I like doing this kind of stuff where I stand and talk for a bit because it's an excuse to make content. But at the same time, I like getting my thoughts out there and seeing what you guys think. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time. Check out my playlists with film talks and stuff like that. And I'll see you on the get-go and the roundabout and the potatoes. Gotta love those potatoes. Spicy.